Hey there, everyone.
Hey.
Hey.
How's it going? What's up, Internet?
Yay.
We're back. Thursday Tech Talk.
Yep, loving it.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to QSE Tech Talk, everyone. I'm Golden Preciado, audio engineer and House of Worship specialist with QSE. And I'm here along with Jason Fernandez, live sound training specialist with QSE.
Right.
Today, we have a cool and exciting topic, and we'll be discussing EQ and how to use it effectively to create a stellar mix.
That's right. How to understand it more or less. This is going to be an awesome topic. I've been looking forward to this one all week, actually.
Nice.
You think we're good to dive in, or should we vamp a little bit, let people sign on? I'm not sure what our viewers are looking like right now, but I'm ready to dive in. I'm charged.
Yeah, I think you could dive in. They can. Yeah. Okay. Go for it.
Here we go. EQ. It stands for equalization, and it is one of the most widely used tools in audio engineering. Whether you're mixing a recording or whether you're doing a live sound event or even a live broadcast event, there are many tools that you're going to find on a mixing console. EQ is probably step one. That is the first place you're going to go, aside from adjusting your fader levels and getting your level mix going. What really is going to start creating a cohesive mix is your EQ and a couple other tools that are going to follow that. But if you're new to mixing, if you can get a grasp on the EQ, you can mix. Okay, like if you kind of just put every other tool aside, if you can get the EQ, you can go. You can make a good sounding mix. And of course, there are other tools that do a lot and can help in other ways. But I think the EQ is a really, really good thing to master if you're going to just focus on one thing. So we're going to take a look at an EQ today. We're going to be demonstrating the EQ on a TouchMix mixer today. But everything we're going to share with you today is universal. You can approach any mixing console, any software EQ, and these concepts are all going to apply to that no matter what you're doing.
Yep, beautiful.
Yeah, so to start off, let's just kind of quickly explain what an EQ is doing. An EQ is effectively kind of shaping the sound of whatever signal it is processing, and it is doing that through a series of what are called filters, and I'll show you that firsthand in a second. And what we're doing with the filters is we're either boosting or raising or attenuating or lowering specific frequencies or frequency bands on the frequency spectrum. So let's first explain what the frequency spectrum is, just in case somebody out there might be foreign to somebody. When you think of sound or audio, everything that we hear with our ears falls within a specific frequency range. And that range happens to be 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz or 20 kilohertz. Hertz is the standard unit of measurement for frequency. And so there you go. So if you think of a sound wave, it sort of kind of oscillates like this, and sound wave are moving through the air. They're making this these peaks and valleys in this pattern. The frequency is cycles per second, like how fast a sound wave completes its cycle within 1 second. So 20 hertz is 20 cycles a second. 20 kilohertz is 20,000 cycles a second. So that's a very loose and very quick and rough description of what that is. Hey, we got someone from Brazil watching. Wow.
I know, that was awesome.
Welcome from Brazil. Thank you for tuning in. And yeah, so with our EQ, we're actually able to manipulate those frequencies and use that to kind of shape and chisel whatever sound we're manipulating or processing to get to either remove unwanted noise or remove unwanted or unpleasant aspects of that noise, or boost and kind of make more present certain areas that we do like. And this serves a multitude of purposes. A, to make things just kind of sound good on their own, but more effectively to make things fit together in a complete mix. When you have multiple signals happening, when you have a voice and a guitar and a bass and a drum set and a keyboard or whatever you're mixing together, all of those things have different characteristics, have different sonic characteristics, and to get them to kind of play together and not overlap each other and kind of make just a big ball of muddy noise, you're gonna have to shape each one of those so they kind of all fit together like a puzzle.
Yes, absolutely.
So there you go. And I think we have we wanted to show. Is this a good time to show your graph, Golden?
Oh,
we do that a little bit later.
Let's see if I can get that up. Actually, as you're explaining, I think I'll bring the graph up a little later.
Perfect.
But all that to say, actually, I could show it now and then I'll bring it up later as well. Because when you think of frequencies, I'm a musician, so I can relate everything to notes on a piano. And that's essentially what frequencies are. So let's say you're a musician and you're mixing for the first time. You can figure out where some of these frequencies are if you're familiar with your instrument and where those notes are. Let me see if I can share this. Share the screen here.
All right. And so to kind of elaborate on what she was saying, every kind of pitch an instrument can make will actually resonate at a specific frequency. There you go. Oh, yes.
Yes, there's my picture. And it shows the piano, what the notes are on the piano, and above the frequencies that they are. And underneath is a list of instruments that operate in a certain range, and we'll talk about those as Jason starts explaining more about EQ. But all that to say, you don't have to get all complicated with frequencies and what they are. They really are just notes.
They're just notes.
So,
it's just pitches.
Yeah. And I bet you many of you already know where many of those notes are. If you're a singer or you play an instrument, without knowing it, you already know where those are. Now all you have
to were to just kind of pair the note that you're familiar with
the frequency number.
And you've got a good head start. And something like this chart is a great way. It's like, think of it like as a cheat sheet to kind of start to learn what frequency is and what the corresponding notes to the specific frequencies are. That way, once you start to understand this and understand what these different frequencies are, when you approach an EQ, you'll have a pretty good idea of where to focus on when you're trying to accomplish certain things. Like if you want to take some low end out of something, you want to focus on like 200 hertz and below. If you're getting some muddiness in the middle, you want to focus on the 400ish range up to 800. More shine or more polish on the top end into something, you're going to want to go up to like 4K, maybe 8K. So things like that. And something like this, when you're relating it to a pitch of your instrument, if you're a player, or to kind of just finding a sheet like this online can help you to sort of correlate.
Yeah, I found this online. I just Googled it up and it came up. It was a great one.
Super easy. Just you can find these all over the internet. There's all kinds of different versions and variations that kind of are related to different things, but they can be a very, very helpful tool to learn this. Think of them as like training wheels to kind of.
And we'll bring this picture back as Jason starts going through our EQ, and he's going to actually show us and let us listen to what is happening with the EQ as he makes the adjustments.
That's right.
So
and
if you've not,
tool, so we got to be able to listen to it to really understand what it's doing, right?
If you've not spent time doing this, this is going to be very educational for you. So here we go.
Awesome. So I'm going to put headphones in here so I can actually hear what I'm doing. And I do have a second microphone set up. I have my broadcast microphone, and I have an additional microphone that I'm going to start affecting. I'm going to get this thing live. Go to my main mix so you guys can hear me.
Hey, Sean, welcome from Mountain View, California.
All right.
Nice to see you on here.
Welcome, Sean. All right. Now you should be listening to me through my secondary mic here, which is running through channel 1 on my mixer. Let's go ahead and open the channel here, and I've already got it set up to my EQ screen. So this is what a parametric EQ looks like. Now, there are 2 different types of EQs. This is a parametric, and there also is a
graphic.
Oh my God, graphic.
Graphic EQ.
My brain just shut itself off. So they're slightly different. They do the same thing, but they do it in slightly different ways. For today, we're going to focus on the parametric EQ here. And so the first step, other than kind of understanding frequency and what you want to be manipulating with this tool, the first step is understanding what all the controls do. So I'm just going to kind of step through. Now, with the parametric EQ, what you have here are your primary filters. And the reason it's called the parametric EQ is because you have any number of filters. This particular EQ has 6 filters. There are some that come with this has 4 filters. There are versions that come with 6 filters and 8 filters and so on. But each filter.
In your outputs, I believe you get 6 or 7. So you have a few more in your outputs.
Yep. So you got a couple more. There are 6, on the output EQ. I'll show that at the end really quickly.
Yep.
So each filter is going to have a set of controls. You can see you got 3 dials here, 3 knobs per filter. And what those are doing is you have your gain. So each filter has a gain. So that is going to control how much of that frequency I'm either going to boost or add or attenuate or cut away. Then we have a frequency. So this one is really important. So we're going to use our gain to boost or attenuate specific frequencies. And then we can actually use our frequency knob here to control what specific frequency or frequency range we're going to boost or cut here. So you can see as I've got selected my filter, there's just sliding back and forth on the 0 line, the unity line, which means it's not doing anything. And we'll get into boosting and cutting in a minute. And then the last knob here, or the last control, is called Q on the TouchMix. There's, depending on the EQ you're working with, it might say bandwidth. It's the same thing. It's essentially going to adjust the width of the filter. I'm going to actually select this one. So I'm going to boost this a little bit, and I'm going to grab my Q knob, and you'll see, there you go. So it narrows it. The higher the Q.
So really quick, Jason, after you do this, go ahead and turn on the RTA so they can see what's happening with it. I know it makes the EQ quite small, so you can maybe switch back and forth, but it would be cool to see what the RTA is doing with those frequencies as you make the switch.
That's a good call.
And then Sean, the output EQ is on all your outputs, the mains, and you also have output EQs, parametric EQs on your auxiliaries as well.
Indeed. Okay. Here we go. Let's take a look at this with my RTA. There we go. So there's the RTA, stands for real-time analyzer. So that is what my voice looks like, essentially. And if I do the same thing, if I take this filter and I push it up a little bit, I can widen that. I can narrow it. Let's get it way up there. There we go. Just going to hear what that did to my voice. Let's do another fun little experiment here. Aside from our 4 main filters, on either side of this is a low cut and a high cut. The low cut in particular is going to be extremely useful. You're going to use this filter on just about anything that you're going to be. So what this does, if I engage that, the low cut, if I engage it, finger, there we go. So you can see that now it's just kind of sloped off and tapered the bottom range, the entire bottom range of my EQ there, my frequency range. And it is currently set to 62 hertz. So that's very, very low. If I start to sweep this up, you should be able to hear and see on the RTA, my voice will start to lose all that low frequency and become very, very thin as I start to get it up here. And it might take a bit for you to be able to hear it. There you go. It's kicking in.
Yeah. We can hear it.
I should sound very, very thin right now. All of the mid and low has been taken out of my voice. You can actually see that in the RTA. That's a pretty cool demo of that. See, all of that is now gone because I've scooped it out with the low cut frequency there.
Now, it's interesting to note that when Jason first started talking and he first started rolling it off, that we didn't hear many changes.
Exactly.
That's because his voice is operating in a certain frequency range, and we hadn't hit the frequencies that his voice was operating in. That's why we didn't hear change right away. But then as he was moving it to the right, we started hearing that we were cutting out some of his operating frequency range, and it got thinner and thinner. But this is the way you determine where to roll off an instrument, is hearing the change as you're rolling to where it starts to change and thin out. And then you can back it off a tad, and that is the roll off point for that instrument.
Exactly. So, and you use your ears. So you take
that filter, definitely use your ear. Now, while we're on the subject, I'm going to bring back up my chart. Brad, if you could put that back in the picture while we're discussing the low frequencies. There we go. Yeah. This has a list of instruments and what their operating ranges are. It's funny because the last time we did something on EQ, I was getting comments like, we don't mix by sight, we mix by sound. Exactly, but you have to know what the operating range of an instrument is so you know where to start and get there quickly. For example, a violin's lowest note is the G before middle C. That's 196 hertz. And you figure you get about an octave and a half or so of resonant frequencies on either end of that. You're going to be rolling that off to starting at 147 hertz.
Yep.
As the violin's lowest note is just a G below middle C, and we're not losing a lot there. I mean, we've lost a lot of low end just because the instrument doesn't operate in that range.
It doesn't need it. Nothing's happening.
Yeah.
You don't need it
and
there.
Then, yeah.
Eliminating that, eliminating its low frequency non-operating range, you're instantly adding clarity to your overall
because you're cutting out all the ambient noise that is operating in that low range. We don't want to hear all that ambient noise. We only want to pick up the instrument that you're mixing. And then, for example, let's say you have a flute. It's the lowest note on a flute is a C. I'm not talking a piccolo flute. I'm just talking a soprano, standard soprano flute. The lowest operating note is a C. That is 261 or 62 hertz. So you'll want to back off, add a few more hertz for the resonant sounds that also come from the instruments. You're backing off to about 200 hertz for a flute. And when you can practice hearing that is by letting a flute player play and then roll off your low cut and listen to where it starts to thin out. And you'll notice that you are rolling off that low cut an awful lot before you hear any change start to happen. So this chart is showing, it's teaching you what the operating ranges of instruments are, because you can set those high cut and low cut frequencies before you ever hear the instrument as a starting point, and then make your adjustments from there. Because remember, when you're mixing a band in real time, it's not only about sound, it's about speed. There's a lot of pressure out in the live world of mixing, and you need to have all this information in your mind. Know the instruments you're mixing, know what their ranges are, so you can quickly bring up a starting EQ. Now, all this to say, the fastest way to get a starting EQ on a TouchMix 30 is to use the presets. Because they are already dialed into you. The low cut and the high cuts are already dialed in for you on those instruments.
Yep.
And honestly, when I'm mixing, because my time frames are so fast and everything moves so fast, the first thing I do is enter a QSC instrument preset. And I will always make my changes from there, because every instrument has slightly different nuances, tones, microphones, but the high cut and low cut are in the right place, the right starting place for those instruments. And that makes it so I can get it going really, really fast.
Really quick. You got it. You're just making minute changes after that.
Yep.
Just to continue on here, to give you guys a slight idea. of how this is affecting my sound. I'm going to show you the high cut. Whoops, we'll select it there. So I turned in my high cut here, and we'll start to scoop that down.
We should bring the lows back in just a little bit. So
then you'll hear nothing. There we go. So there's the lows, and there's my low cut goes down to about 1K. So now
getting all muddy.
I sound real muddy. It's not good. So that's you kind of associate, what that sounds like when you apply that filter and sweep that down. Now let's take a look at. I'm going to pop up this filter at about 2K where we kind of started with, and I'm going to sweep this up and down so we can experience a couple of different frequencies. So right now I'm very heavily boosting 2K, and if I sweep this down, let's hear. Whoops. Yeah, that's sweeping. Now I'm going to go to 1K. So now I'm boosting 1K. We got a fairly wide Q. I'm going to narrow it a little bit. So we focus a little bit more on that 1K. And then I can go down further. There's 800. So you should be able to kind of get a sense of how it's changing the sound of my voice as I sweep down these frequencies. There's 400. So now we're starting to get into some mud territory.
Yes.
You might not be able to hear this over the internet, but there's 200. That's adding a lot more low end resonance to my voice.
Yep.
Making me sound very, very boomy. Let's go the other way. Let's go to 4K. So that's 4K. So now that's a lot higher up in the register.
Yeah.
It's giving me some top end. And if we go to 8K, there we go. That's a little bit harder to hear because, again, that my voice doesn't have a lot of the really, really high frequencies in its operating.
Yeah. But what it's doing is accenting your sibilants, your S's.
That's right.
And the air in your voice, those things that you can hear at those frequencies.
Right.
What he's doing right now is called sweeping. He takes a frequency, a center point of a frequency, and he's sweeping it across the spectrum. And this is actually a really helpful a really helpful tool for identifying problems. For example, if there's something that's bothering you with the shape of a sound, you can boost a frequency and sweep it till you find where it sounds really bad, and to find it, and then knock it out. Do a cut there.
That would look like this. So let's say there was just something that was bugging me. I sweep. I've got my filter up really high. I sweep it. I find it here. Once I've identified it, you just go the other way. You just pull it out.
Exactly.
That frequency, that resonance, that's nasty. That you don't like it, and it makes it go away.
Now, let's say you're in a live show, and you've identified a monitor that's feeding back, and you're not exactly sure which frequency it's feeding back at. You can do a narrow sweep. Go ahead, Jason, and put that back up with a narrow Q. Yeah. And you can sweep it across until you hear what's really feeding back.
Check. Yep.
And then and then you'll drop it out when it's feeding back. You can drop it out, and that's the way you can notch feedback. Now, in a live situation, you may not want to cause feedback to find the problem. But in a live situation, what I do is a narrow Q. So go ahead and let's cut it, Jason. And a lot of times I'll have a starting place. In my mind, I will hear kind of where it's feeding back. And usually it's not like full on feeding back. It's just starting to hum. So I will take that narrow Q and sweep it across. Actually, I'll do a cut though. I won't actually. Got it. So in a live situation, we don't want to. We're live, yeah, we're live. I'll do a narrow cut, and I'll slowly sweep it till the feedback is gone. And this is the way I can get rid of feedback in a live situation in a monitor. Problem is, a lot of times in sound check, stuff changes because people turn up amps. They sing differently. I mean, a lot of stuff changes. So I'm using this technique a lot in those loud live monitor situations, just to quickly go grab something that's on the edge and about to go.
Right there, and you'll know it's right there. You can kind of start to hear it. It's about to take off, And then
Yep.
just like Golden, you're explaining, when you get the sweep going, you get that cut sweep, and as soon as you hit it, it just evaporates.
Exactly. Yep.
Nice.
It's a beautiful tool. It's called sweeping. And you actually, on your analog boards, you have what's called the sweepable mid on your analog boards. You have 4 controls. The top is your highs, which is fixed at usually, I think it's 5K.
Okay.
And then you have your sweepable mid. So the one that says frequency, you can put on a starting frequency that you think is having a problem. And then you can take the knob above it, which is the sweep, and take that control and sweep it across and make the EQ go away. And that's something you would do in the individual channel on an analog board. So you can accomplish the same thing on an analog board. You obviously don't get the graphic, but it can be done, and you can make it work and sound good.
Yeah, you can make it work. Yeah, when you're working with an analog tool like that, you're relying solely on your ears and your knowledge of what the knobs are doing. You know, have this nice graph that kind of gives you the visual representation, which is good. And it's good to be able to have that knowledge, to be able to kind of study up on your frequency range chart and
Yep.
associate it with pitches or you know, wherever
Yes.
it clicks for you in your mind, and
Yes.
that'll give you it'll, you know, kind of it'll unpair you from needing the visual aid.
Right. And I just saw Jose Rodriguez from Saginaw, Texas show up. He said better late than never, and we are so glad you're here.
Right.
I hope you can grab something from this. You can always go back to the video later and watch the beginning.
So then let's do this, Golden, to put a cap on this here.
Yep.
Let's set up an example scenario. Let's say we've got a trio, you know, that we're going to be running sound for. We've got a vocalist who's playing guitar, and we've got a bass and maybe a little trap kit drummer or a cajon or something like that. What are, and obviously, you know, we've already stated, use the presets. Get the presets going. That's a great starting point, and just kind of fine tune things from there. But let's say we're unfortunately not using a TouchMix, and we don't have presets available to us. Where would you start? What are some kind of what starting point advice that you would give?
So on the bass is going to be, believe it or not, it is a full range instrument. You think bass because they play a lot in the low end, but the slapping, the pluck of the strings, that is all high end stuff. So what I would do only a very, very slight roll off on the bottom.
Okay.
But I would do a small dip at around 200. And I'd be adding it to the sub. So whatever needed to be added to the subs, and I usually have mine on an aux fed sub, I would do that later. So I would do a small dip at 200 on bass. Now, if I may sweep it around to see, because a lot of basses, especially if they're going direct, will have a woofiness to it that you want to get rid of that. And I would do a boost at about 2 to 3K to grab the pluck of the strings.
Let's say we'll split it. We'll say 25.
Sure. And I do a wider Q than that.
Yep. We can widen it a bit. We'll get that. We got 60 to here. If I turn the RTA off.
Yeah, you can see a little better.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's a big.
And less low cut roll off.
Yep.
Yeah.
Saying about 30.
Yeah. And then for my guitar, if you want to switch to a new channel.
Let me find a channel that I'm not using here. Oh, channel 2. Look at that.
So guitar, the lowest note on a guitar is about 82 hertz. But this guitar player is playing with a bass player, and we don't want them banging and operating too much in the same range. So I'm going to start the guitar roll off at about 90 hertz, and perhaps depending on how the guitar player is playing, I may roll it off to 100. Okay. But there's a lot of things that come into play when a person is playing. I would do a cut at 160, depending on the pickup they're using, and it's usually a pretty narrow cut.
Yeah.
For some reason, that is just on guitar, a bothersome frequency.
Yeah.
Pickups, I don't know why. Now, if he's playing with the drummer, I'm going to do about a 5K boost to give it some air.
There we go.
And so that may be a starting position. And if I hear overlap from the guitar with the bass, I may roll that guitar off until I hear that each instrument is sitting in its proper place. And you'll hear mud build up. And if you were to look at your RTA, you would see that muddy buildup in your RTA.
There's no RTA. So, but the RTA is a fine tool for kind of helping to identify where the mud is building up specifically.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So vocal. Let's go to a vocal.
Yeah. Let me get me. I think channel 4 here. We'll do a vocal starting point.
My starting place for a vocal on the low cut is 100 hertz. And you'll notice on your analog boards that your low end is fixed, and they always give you a roll off that starts at 100 hertz. That's just a great place to start for a vocal. From there, depending on your room and what's going on, I would make a cut at 400 to 500 hertz. Now,
lost it.
I would, at all this time, I would be listening to the person sing and keep rolling it off, because if it's a female voice, I can actually roll it off quite a bit more.
Oh yeah.
That on the bottom, on the low cut, let's pretend it's a female voice. It could roll off to 150.
There you go.
Yeah. And then on there, it depending on the proximity of their positioning to the mic, you may have to dump out a bunch of low end. You could use that the first low frequency there, and let's pretend they're on a really close proximity to the mic. There's a thing called proximity buildup, and the closer you are to your microphone, the more low frequencies get in there. And close proximity to a mic is awesome for the mixer because it gives them control, but it also builds up the low frequencies. So I may do a big cut with that first frequency 1, and let's say they're in just
real wide.
Dump a bunch. Mine looks like a step. I mean, because I sing with very close proximity to the mic, so it might look like that. Depend. I might do.
Listen to when I go like this versus if I hold it back out like this.
Yeah, you can hear how the low end disappears as he backs off the mic. So then I would probably do around a 4 to just for air, a 4 to 6K boost, and it would depend on the person's voice. I wouldn't always do that. Some voices are very sibilant and have this high end tone.
You want to be careful.
But on a warm voice, just to help them out, because my voice is warm when I sing, so I tend to need to add these frequencies back. But I have some of the jazz singers, they're very cutting, and I end up actually taking some of that out of the mix, especially the ones with hard S's. And some people even breathe with sibilance. I don't know how it's done, but
yeah. I mean, everyone's going to be different, and you are definitely going to chase some of these points, the starting points.
Yeah.
But just to give you kind of an idea of what your thought process is, and then what you would do and how you would apply that to the EQ. I think those are awesome examples. And then we do Jose pitched in a question here. Is there a preferred preset for a cajon? I believe actually there is.
There is. There is a preferred
TouchMix 30. Yes.
Is that preset on the 16? I don't remember.
I want to say that it isn't at this time, but let's look. Percussion.
It would be under percussion.
Yeah, it's not on the 8 and 16 yet, but if you have access to a 30, you can save any of those presets onto a hard drive or a thumb drive, and you can just port them into 8 or 16. And I want to say a while ago we were trying to work on a repository, a web repository where we just kind of like have all of our presets, and so you could just go download them. I don't know if that ever happened, but if you are on and this is cutting to the end here, but if you're on the Facebook user group on Facebook, or if you're in the Live Sound House of Worship group, send us a message, and I'd be happy to just send it to you.
Yeah. Do we have a place where you can upload presets for things?
We're checking.
Okay.
I just got word we are checking right now. We're gonna be able to confirm that momentarily. But yeah, you are good. Yeah, and again, if you send me a message, if you send me an email, shoot me a note on Facebook or something like that, I'd be happy to just email you the presets. They're very small. You can email them back and forth pretty easily.
Yep. There's so much more. We could go on for hours on EQ. I mean, there's so many helpful.
40 minutes here.
I know.
Maybe we'll do a part 2 on this at some point, because I do want to tackle EQ or compression next week, but maybe we'll circle back around at some point and kind of keep going with EQ conversation, because it's vast. I mean, this would just kind of scratch the surface. Hopefully, if you're not familiar with EQ, or if you've never even touched an EQ before, this at least gave you enough knowledge to kind of understand what it's doing, and kind of start to mess around with the tools and kind of know what's happening when you're adjusting the different dials and things like that.
Yes, absolutely. Well, before I go, I wanted to let you know a couple.
We just posted the link to the preset downloads. So yeah.
Oh, I see that.
You can access all of the presets there. Nice. There's some good ones. Like the Cajon one is in there. There's also a nice one for an electric drum set. So if you're connecting an electric drum set, just stereo electric drums, we made a cool preset for that. There's all kinds of cool stuff in there.
For the 6 and 18, you'll have to add a few more of the presets. All of these are on the 30, but for the 6 and 18, you'll want to add some of the newer presets on there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Love to learn and locate how to handle feedback. Yes.
That is an entire tech talk on its own.
So I've got a list of these, and it's getting bigger by the second. We'll definitely tackle feedback. We're going to tackle compression. We'll come back to EQ. EQ and feedback that's almost one conversation. They kind of go together. But yeah, so we'll come back with a lot of these. I think we got to wrap this one up for today.
So Juliet, I just wanted to quickly let you know, there's a Facebook group called Church Sound Training. It's for church sound people, but the concepts that I'm teaching are just across the board. They work for any soundboard, for anything. They're audio concepts. And we just went over a long and involved series on feedback. You may want to check that group out and then go ahead and take a look at all those posts, because they're super helpful. But I also wanted to let you know about our QSC TouchMix group. If you own a TouchMix or are interested in owning a TouchMix, or even if you don't own one, but you find yourself mixing on one, which is the case for a lot of our mixers where I work, this is an informative group about everything TouchMix. And then, of course, the Church Sound Training, which I mentioned, which we discuss audio concepts, universal audio concepts, and the applications are applied to a church mixing situation, but they're concepts that would apply across the board.
They're pretty generic audio concepts that fit anywhere.
I started it for House of Worship because people in House of Worship tend to be volunteers and need to start from the beginning on their education. So that's why that group came about. But it's information that everybody should know if they're out in the real world mixing.
Agreed, 100%. Okay.
All right.
Well, I think we did EQ part 1 tackled.
Yes.
Again, hopefully that was helpful. Thanks for tuning in and hanging out with us. See you guys next week.